Today on Across the Fence, research at the University of Vermont is soaring to new heights, and it's helping communities here and all across the country. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael in for Judy Simpson. We've all heard or used the expression, a bird's eye view. It generally means getting a view from above, as if we were seeing something by a bird in flight. Well, there's a lab at the University of Vermont that can provide a bird's eye view to just about anything in the world. It's called the Uvm Spatial Analysis Lab, and it's helping communities all across Vermont. It's also helping in California, and at the Chesapeake Bay, and at the Delaware River Basin. Across the Fence's Rebecca Gollan tells us more.
University of Vermont researchers are taking to the skies. They're using new technology to tackle some age-old problems.
So in the Spatial Analysis Lab, we deal with anything that involves mapping the Earth's surface.
Jarlath O'Neill Dunn is the director of the Uvm Spatial Analysis Lab. The lab is located at UVM's George D. Aiken Center and is part of the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources. The faculty and research professionals in the lab work with partners both within and outside of the university.
We work with a broad array of stakeholders. They include people within the state government, such as the Vermont Agency of Transportation, who asks us to go out and collect drone imagery after a disaster, or the City of San Diego, who we're working with right now to assess their tree canopy to help them plan a greener future.
The lab specializes in extracting and interpreting large data sets. In San Diego, the city already had aerial imagery and came to the Spatial Analysis Lab to get additional information out of that existing data. In their case, they wanted to map the tree canopy of the city, which is one of the lab's specialties. Another project involves mapping land cover in the Chesapeake Bay Watershed and Delaware River Basin.
And by land cover, we mean not just the trees, but the buildings, agricultural fields, the wetlands, all of those things. And these are areas which decision makers need to understand how much non-point source pollution. So all this thing that can run off our land that gets into our valuable waterways and pollutes them, they need to know that.
While much of the work does take place in front of computers with information that was collected elsewhere, there is a specialized team from the lab that travels throughout Vermont with high-tech mapping drones. On any given day, that drone team might be helping the transportation agency collect images of hard-to-reach infrastructure or participating in emergency preparedness drills with various state agencies, or even responding to actual emergencies.
We really got into the sort of drone business, if you will, and not the business of making drones, but the business of flying drones after Tropical Storm Irene and seeing the damage it did to Vermont and our inability to get overhead imagery quickly to the people that needed to make those decisions. All these satellites are great, but it takes a little bit of time to tell them the area to image. And we're also the cloudiest state in the union, so when a satellite takes a picture, it's not always a picture of what we need. It can just be a picture of a bunch of white fluffy stuff. So with drones, we can get out there quickly, map the area, and pass that information on to decision makers. And that may be something like a train derailment in Northfield, where we get that imagery and pass it off to emergency operations. Or it could be something like the stream studies that we've done in Plainfield, Vermont, where we're helping them understand the dynamics within their streams so that the consulting engineers they've hired to redesign their bridge have the information they need.
The high-resolution information the drone team collects provides the most accurate and detailed aerial imagery possible. Along with analyzing data and providing information for their partners, the drone team collects imagery for the lab itself and also works with students to gather information they might need. On this day, the team is at Shelburne Farms with UVM Natural Resources PhD student Lindsay Barbieri, who's doing research on agricultural management and the environment.
What's really exciting is the drones allow us to be really flexible in the timing, so we can actually fly after big events like rain events or management events. So on agricultural fields, those management events are like manure spreading or harvesting.
Barbieri's research includes monitoring and comparing corn and hay fields. She's looking at different ways the fields can be managed and how those treatments affect crop yield, the environment, and the economic bottom line for farmers.
Within these two fields, what we're measuring is water, so in terms of surface water runoff, so for water quality indicators, we're looking at the field runoff that comes off of these fields. We're looking at leaching, so water that leaches through the soil column. So we have lysimeters under the field that are collecting all of the water that's leaching through the fields. And then we're also monitoring greenhouse gas emissions.
The extreme high-resolution images and the layers of information they capture create a 3D model of the landscape that's accurate to a couple of centimeters. That allows Barbieri to do detailed models of water flow to help her understand what's happening on the field level. Barbieri monitors the greenhouse gas levels on the ground, but the equipment to measure soil emissions is cumbersome and expensive, and the process can be very time-consuming. A recent advance in drone technology has given Barbieri the opportunity to take some of those measurements in the air.
One of the other things that we're exploring on this grant, and one of the maybe even slightly more groundbreaking areas in terms of drone use, is actually putting sensors on the drone itself. So now instead of just getting imagery, we can actually put on the drone like a sensor, for example, for carbon dioxide, which is one of the gases, one of the greenhouse gases that we monitor on the field. So we can put this carbon dioxide sensor on the drone. We have a very small, tiny, lightweight sensor that we can put on the drone and then have it monitoring the atmosphere. So as it's flying these fields, it can record the carbon dioxide levels at each point that it takes. So we have it set to every 2 seconds. So we get these carbon dioxide readings, and then that can help us even more directly pare down to the field level when we monitor our greenhouse gases on the field level.
Barbieri's research is still in an exploratory phase as she gathers information and figures out what will be most useful. She's looking to find a way to link the atmospheric data from the drone with the readings from the sensor she has on the ground. For now, the ease of using drones opens up a whole new world for her research, and she hopes that accessibility will inspire others as well.
They're becoming really ubiquitous on the market in terms of even just like small children have them, old, grandfathers have them, grandmothers, my grandmother flew a drone recently. So the more people can use them, and I guess the more people can use them easily, the more that really opens up a wide range of monitoring capabilities for earth sciences.
Taking to the sky to get answers on the ground. From agriculture and the environment to infrastructure and public safety, the Spatial Analysis Lab is mapping the Earth's surface and providing information that will help communities in Vermont and beyond. In Burlington, I'm Rebecca Gollin with Across the Fence.
And thank you, Rebecca. Absolutely fascinating, the use of technology. Here in the studio, joining me now are two members of the Uvm Spatial Analysis Lab team. Jarlath O'Neill-Dunn, as we saw in the video, is the lab's director, and alongside Jarlath is Emma Estabrook. She's one of the lab's certified operators of unmanned aircraft systems. We know them as drones. Good afternoon. Thank you both for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Starting with you, Jarlath, what's the history of this geospatial technology, specifically in Vermont?
Well, we've been mapping the landscape for centuries, right? And it was always done on paper maps. And in the 80s, we started moving to digital mapping technology. And the Spatial Analysis Lab, which I now run, back in the 80s, really started out as a digital sweatshop. And the people there were taking these paper maps and converting them to digital information. Fast forward a few decades, and now we have the Vermont Center for Geographic Information, where you can go and download gigabytes of different geospatial data in Vermont. And you can take that and bring it into your computers and work with it. And then you even have the companies such as Google that make those same data sets accessible to us on our smartphones so that we can interact and use them to make better decisions.
A reason for all of this growth and interconnectivity has to do with drone technology, is that right?
Exactly.
You want to talk a little bit about what you perceive as the benefits of drone technology? unmanned aerial surveillance systems?
Sure. So the UAS term came out of the fact that the FAA, that's their technical term for it, but all of us know them as drones. And really what's exciting about drones is that in the past, getting overhead aerial imagery was rather challenging. You had to have a satellite or some sort of manned plane up there, and that's both costly and expensive. And we saw this during Tropical Storm Irene, how difficult it was for decision makers in Vermont to get access to imagery. And drones now make it possible for us to get up and do this type of very detailed mapping, but have those organic capabilities here in the state. So if a state agency calls us, or if a community is having problems, or maybe even an engineering firm needs a detailed map to do site plans, we can get up there with our drones and generate that type of data and information for them.
Now, Emma, as I said at the beginning, and I kind of butchered it, but you've recently become an FAA certified operator. What does that entail?
Yeah, so to become a certified remote pilot, you have to take a knowledge exam, and you also have to go through a background check, because in the United States, to legally fly a drone for commercial use, you have to have a remote pilot certification. So I took my knowledge test in December, and it covers quite a wide range of topics, from different types of air classes to airport operations to just general UAS regulations. And it does seem like quite a lot to know, but it's all for safety, to make sure that the FAA knows that remote pilots can make safe and informed decisions while flying their drones.
So you've proven you have that safety and knowledge, and your testing time came in the field. That's how you were able to acquire the maneuverability skills, I guess, for lack of
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was all on the job. And we have another remote pilot in the lab, so I've worked under him over the past year.
There's sort of a flip side to this, and just playing devil's advocate, we all know that there's often some controversy about drones. Concerns about privacy, things like that you want to address or talk about?
Oh, there's absolutely those concerns out there, and they're justly warranted. I mean, no one wants to have someone prying in their backyard. What I always tell people is that when it comes to thinking about privacy, really don't focus on the regulation of the drone. The drone is just a platform, and you can mount all sorts of different sensors on that. It could be a gas sensor looking for a natural gas leak, right? It could be a radiological sensor sensing for radioactivity, or it could be a camera that could have some privacy concerns. But I think we have the similar privacy concerns of someone with a telephoto lens, right? We've got dozens of companies now operating satellites that can get image of your backyard every single day. So regulating or just being concerned about drones isn't looking at the full picture.
Yeah, a lot of issues that are involved. Emma, tell us a little bit about, you're a UVM undergraduate. You've graduated from the university. How did you first get involved with the Spatial Analysis Lab?
Yeah, so I started working at the Spatial Analysis Lab when I was a junior at UVM. I was an environmental science major with a geospatial technology minor. And as I got more interested in my minor, I wanted to see how GIS was used in a working environment. And I thought the Spatial Analysis Lab was a really great way to get that experience. So I started on as a manual corrections person. So that basically means it's the land cover that Jarlath creates. Although accuracy, it is really high, it doesn't always visually look that great to the eyes. So what my job was, and a lot of other student employees do, is correct that. So it visually does look good and it looks trustworthy.
Jarlath, we were talking before we actually began the program, whether it's the technology related to the drones, as we know, the systems. This is only going to get better, increase. There are going to be changes, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
There's a lot of changes. When I started doing this as an undergraduate in the mid-90s, the limitation was the lack of data. We didn't have that many satellites up there. We didn't have much digital data. Now we have the explosion of digital data. We've got hundreds of satellites up there. We've got all these drones, all this manned aircraft, all this data coming out. And our big challenge now isn't, do we have this map, but can we integrate this to help us make better decisions? And this flood of information that's coming to us.
Yep. Well, I do need to jump in there because we're just about out of time. Folks can find out more online. This is only part of the discussion, the richness of what you do. So how can folks find you?
Sure, absolutely. If you just go into any search engine, type UVM Spatial Analysis Lab, you'll come up to us and you can come and check out some of our projects and the interesting work that we're doing and our students at UVM.
Awesome, and our director Adam Wright has put that on the screen. I want to thank both of you very much for coming in. I do wish we had more time, but thank you both.
Great, thanks so much.
That is our program for today. We know you have choices, so thanks for choosing us. I'm Will Michael, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit across the fence.